Hello, everybody. Bob Odenkirk's back with more movies in the John Wicksploitation franchise, Wicksploitation subgenre,
Wixlop.
Wickslup, whatever you want to call it. So, Aiden, what is the plot of Normal?
Despite the name and cast, Normal is not technically a spin-off of Nobody, but it was made by all the same people, starring the same guy, and uses the same naming format. Normal follows Ulysses, a stand-in sheriff in a small town in Minnesota, who very quickly discovers that the Yakuza secretly controls everything, and then they fight. And fight and fight. And there's kind of just not really a plot past like the 40-minute mark in favor of fighting. So Connor, what do you think of Normal?
Normal was good. I was really scared it would be exactly the same as Nobody, and there obviously were some similarities in that they're both Wicksploitation. How many times can Bob Odenkirk say I'm an old guy who's Wicksploitation? But this movie differs from a lot of them. A lot of these movies are like, X reason, I'm an ex-Army Ranger. I used to be a master hitman assassin. I was the woman in charge of killing for the KGB or something. You know, that type of shit. Or I went to elite ballerina school. I consider ballerina part of the Wicksploitation franchise despite the...
Yeah.
Or subgenre despite the...
Despite the name.
Despite the officially licensed thing. But I mean, all of these are the same producers. It's the same couple people pissing in the same pot over and over again. So this movie took place in small town Minnesota. Would have been very northern Minnesota. There were moose. They don't have moose down here in the cities. And it's like more southern moose. Yeah, it's more of a Canada thing. About 4,500 moose. The moose population stayed pretty steady lately. Beautiful creatures. But, so somewhere in northern Minnesota, Bob Odenkirk does his thing. But the one thing I like is, so he's a cop, man, and you're like, okay, so he's a cop, and he'll be like, I used to fight cartels in Mexico or something, and that's why he's John Wick. But he's not really John Wick in this movie. Like, there's a lot of John Wick type action. How the violence is shot, how a lot of the scenes are framed, it's probably the same stunt actors we saw in John Wick 4, 3, 2, 1, Brad Mary, etc. They're all the same.
Yep.
But one thing I like is that everyone's kind of schlubby and nobody actually is like super John Wicky. Like there's a good portion of this movie where Bob Odenkirk's on the run from the town and everybody's trying to kill him because they're all in league with the Yakuza. And they're all kind of just shooting each other from across the street and then running away.
Yeah.
And it's not like the John Wick where 30 guys break into his house and with precision he takes them all out in 3 minutes or whatever, you know. Which I kind of appreciated. So, and in some ways, tonally, it felt slightly separated from the Wicksploitation. It had the DNA. I would say it's at least Wicksploitation adjacent. I mean, it's the same producers. It feels very John Wick when the action starts, despite the fact that most of the characters are supposed to be fairly amateurish, and there's still that kind of larger-than-life atmosphere. It's not, people aren't getting shot and then, their heads are blowing up or they're falling dead, it's not realistic by any means, but, they tried to do some different stuff. Like, in Nobody, he's Master Assassin, who's now a dad. He's like a dad who was also John Wick at some point. Now he has to do John Wick fights. Like, yep. Here, they differentiated it. I was really scared when I heard. I was like, why would they make Normal if it's just another John Wick clone like Nobody? But it's a fair bit different. The plot is a little weak, nonsensical. Yeah. Occasionally a little disjointed. There's this general idea. It's very plot light, kind of like the early John Wick. But unlike the early John Wick, I feel like everybody's really passive. Like the town's like, we want to kill Bob Odenkirk because he's against the Yakuza. Then Bob Odenkirk's like, I don't actually care about the Yakuza after he stumbles into killing half the town. He's like, you guys can just do whatever. It's a big misunderstanding, because truthfully, I don't give a fuck. And they're all like, okay. So then they become friends with the Yakuza, and then hilarity ensues, and shenanigans causes one last fight scene, and you get the idea. The closest thing we had to a John Wick character is there was this sheriff that was killed by the Fonz, who's like the evil mayor, and his daughter's like an army ranger or something. They give her reason to be John Wick, and there's like 2 scenes where she's doing badass John Wick stuff, but even she's kind of just like even the final battle's too hectic. Nobody's John Wick, and everybody's just kind of seething around on the ground trying to shoot each other. So I don't know. It's weird. It feels like it was trying to be not necessarily Fargo, but Coen Brothers inspired, but like with a John Wick twist is what I feel like they said. And then they said, well, what if we set it in Minnesota? Because Fargo was in Minnesota. And they were like, okay, whatever. So it very much has like that impression of Minnesota where it's the Arctic Circle. There's moose running around and it's cold and boring and
dumb criminals.
It's true, but it's also, a little bit cartoony. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it was fine. It was unique for the Wicksploitation genre to an extent. As unique as, a lot of people are inspired by old Coen Brothers, and a lot of people, mostly the same 4 producers who created the original John Wick, mind you, are inspired by the John Wick movies to make this whole subgenre of action movies, John Wick-like action movies. So it's unique in the form that it's derivative of 2 things rather than a single thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it perfects being a John Wick clone. I don't think it perfects being a Coen Brothers clone, but at least it's not your run-of-the-mill Coen Brothers clone or run-of-the-mill John Wick clone, which I guess gives it some uniqueness. It's kind of not the best of both worlds, but the fact that you kind of merge it makes it fairly unique, I suppose. It's something they tried something different, and I suppose
it's very fortunately nothing like Nobody 2, which is fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's not overdoing the John Wick influences, and it also isn't like a Bad Times at the El Royale where it's like, okay, this really wants to be Coen Brothers but isn't quite there.
Yeah.
This movie knows it's a little dumb. It knows it's a bit of a John Wick clone. It knows it's a bit of a Fargo-inspired movie, but it's just kind of like, okay, it is what it is. Yeah. So, Aiden, what did you think of Normal?
I agree with you on most everything. I think this is decently fun. I think the sort of amateurishness of the characters makes the whole situation a little less obviously John Wicky, separates it out a little bit, gives a little bit of that Coen Brothers flair, although certainly not to the degree the Coen Brothers used to make movies. Probably the biggest issue with the movie is that right when the action starts, the Fonz gets killed, and he's essentially the central villain of the plot. Like, he's the one who made the deal with the Yakuza, and he's also like the charismatic villain who probably should have stuck around and
the conflict,
been someone to bounce.
The conflict almost entirely just whimpers out after he dies halfway through the movie or whatever.
Well, he dies, and then there's 30 more minutes of fighting, and then Bob Odenkirk says, you guys can do whatever with the Yakuza, I don't really care, and then the Yakuza show up, so they all have to die. But Henry
they
Winkler
were like,
probably
well, they
should have
even
been.
they were like, we're friends with the Yakuza, this is great, and then comic mischief causes them to have to get in a shootout with the Yakuza.
More or less, yeah.
Which is sort of the problem in terms of like why the plot's a little clumsy, because nobody really has agency to do anything. The Yakuza only fought because of the comic mischief leading to the death of their leader, and
their leader's even killed by comic mischief.
The leader's killed by comic mischief, which causes the Yakuza, who otherwise liked the Minnesota people well enough, to get in a battle out of obligation
Yeah.
because they needed to end the movie.
But yeah, the Fonz probably should have been a like overlaying villain, and also the movie sets up the old police chief's daughter, the military girl, really early, and then Bob Odenkirk meets her and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna put you in the cell overnight so you can sober up." And then she's just never mentioned for the next 40 minutes while Bob Odenkirk teams up with these two bank robbers. And then halfway through the movie, he's like, "All right, guys,
You guys can
you can head out now. I'll handle the rest of this." And then it switches over to his daughter, and I really just have to ask, like, why?
Well, then you also got to keep in mind, for a while, Jay Electronica's like the main villain.
Yeah.
And then he changes sides.
Yeah.
And then he changes sides again. He's a pretty inconsistent character in terms of his actual goals.
But, like, if you hadn't just left the daughter in the cell, she could have been, like... And then just replace the bank robbers with her and have her be, like, sniffing around because she suspects something, and that's what starts it all. And then her and Bob Odenkirk could develop more of a bond, because the movie ends with them becoming, like, partners. They're, like, co-chiefs of some town. But she's in the movie for, like, 5 minutes, and then she's gone from half of it just to show up after the other two secondary leads.
They
movie.
establish her like she's going to be some sort of key to the plot. And you think Bob Odenkirk's going to be, like, in over his head, and she's going to come in on some, like, come with me if you want to live type of shit, because she's the super army rangers they establish.
No.
And then there's a single scene where Bob Odenkirk is moderately threatened, and she intervenes, and then they're best friends, and then... but then the action's totally petered out, so then nothing happens until the Yakuza shows up with her.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens.
I mean, the big resolution to the original plot is Bob Odenkirk calls everyone into an ice cream shop with a little guy dressed in, like, a spinny rainbow hat, like a little toddler.
Yeah.
And him and Bob Odenkirk hash it out, and Bob Odenkirk says, "I really don't give a shit about any of this." And then there's just a second plot hitched on the back so there can be one more action scene. It's
also
very strange.
So the bank robbers leave with a single bar of gold that'll set them up for a long time because they're down on their luck people. So Bob Odenkirk cuts them some slack given the situation. So you'd think the Yakuza would go in and check and be like, "Okay, it looks good, let's go eat dinner." And then, like, maybe the Yakuza accountant will be like, "There's a thing of gold missing," and then that could reignite the plot. But instead what they do is Jay Electronica accidentally slips on a banana peel and falls, and his gun discharges.
It's not his gun. They go to the Keach family restaurant where there's loaded guns hanging on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And that Rube Goldberg's into, like,
the final
like there's a
destination.
statue with a finger pointing out and the gun falls on it and, like, twirls around and blasts the Yakuza's head off. Just like the Looney Tunes plot continuation device.
Yeah, they were like, "Okay, how the hell do we resolve this? Because everybody's friends. The Yakuza likes these white people. They're fine with these weird Minnesota people. Yakuza man even likes their gross roast beef. What is there to say?" And they're like, "Alright, we'll just create, like, a final destination scenario to kill this guy so we can keep it going for a couple more minutes."
Yeah. It's a little bit of a mess, but it's a decently fun mess.
Yeah.
Connor, would you recommend Normal?
I'd
Keep wanting to call it
recommend it
Nobody.
well enough. I don't know. It's, like, kind of a unique John Wick clone. It's, like, fine. Stuff is starting to kind of come out again, though, which is kind of my trepidation with it, because it's okay. Like, if you're a fan of John Wick and the Wicksploitation movies, it's not a terrible, like...
Yeah.
It's not a terrible hanger-on to that subgenre of action, and it's somewhat unique where a lot of these movies are like X scenario and X star are now John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
He's
including nobody.
Including nobody. So you Yeah, if what we talked about sounds interesting, I don't think it's a bad time. If it doesn't sound like something that interests you, I'm not going to try to persuade you to watch it. So I'll give it a trepidatious sure. So Aiden, what would you recommend this movie?
It's a light recommend. It's a okay enough watch. It's not terrible. If you haven't been completely drained on action movies after years of all the Wicksploitation crap and slop and all that other stuff, this is a little bit different than those in a lot of ways and decently worth a watch.